Howdy. Hopefully, you all are getting prepared for Thanksgiving. It is tomorrow. So, first and foremost, we at uh, we at Jocks of All Trades podcast want to thank each and every one of our viewers, subscribers. Being thankful for them for being a part of our podcast and watching and liking, subscribing, so on and so forth. So, we first off want to say thank you very much from the bottom of our hearts for listening to us. Whether you're having a good fantasy season, whether you're not, we just want to say thank you first and foremost. So we are, well, actually, it's just me tonight. No, and presenting another episode of Armchair GMs brought to you by Jocks of All Trades podcast. Uh, Jay, I believe, is on his way to Jacksonville right now. So first and foremost, or second and foremost, safe travels, Jay. Have fun with your family in Jacksonville. So first, before I get on to anything, I want to get into, our ads. So let me get that all situated. So our first ad comes from Fresh Cuts. Fresh Cuts is a local barbershop in Marion, Indiana. Contact Caleb Kemper for an appointment time through www.freshcutsbarbershop.com. It is not just a haircut, it's an experience. Our second ad comes from Steve Wood Illustrations. They are here for all your art needs from Star Wars to G.I. Joe and beyond. See him for all your nerds in your life who you aren't sure what to get. It is the holiday season. I'm sure Steve will hook you up with some sort of illustration or whatever you want to give to a gift for your fellow nerds or any nerds in your life. Contact him. Our next ad is from Culture Corner. Our friends from Afro Latinos are changing things up. Check out the Culture Corner podcast featuring Abed and Shaylin and hear from them soon as they are still under construction. Then our next one is Rules of the Frame is another friend cast specializing in movie reviews of pretty much anything there is. Connor will soon be a guest on our other show, Smash Popcorn, and we look forward to collabing with them. Last and certainly not least is 1,000 Wives of Weird. 1,000 Wives of Weird is just that, weird, from reviews of weird movies to criticizing bad movie choices. Brad H. and Billy Martell will keep you entertained and laughing for hours on end. Check them out exclusively on Spotify. All right. Well, I'm just going to hop right into it. Like I said, everyone is getting ready for Thanksgiving, but wanted to present you guys with NFL news, fantasy notes, in hopes that it'll, make your season go a little bit better as far as fantasy football goes. So for news and notes, first on my list, Melvin Gordon and Darrell Henderson were waived from their respective teams. Last I checked, Darrell Henderson, if no one had if no one had claimed him on waivers by today, the Rams were considering signing him to the practice squad. I'm not sure what the idea behind letting Darrell Henderson go was, but because you can make the argument that he was the number one back in that Rams decimated offense. But it is what it is. Melvin Gordon, I can understand because he has had quite a few fumbles this year. I mean, I really don't blame the Broncos on that move. So it'll be interesting to see what direction the Rams and Broncos go as far as running back goes. Zach Wilson, he was benched for his post-game comments, I think. That's just my opinion. In that loss on Sunday, Mike White will be taking his place as the starter against Chicago. Personally, I think it's a good move. I mean, Mike White, he that one game he went off. In fact, I'm going to pull up the notes while I talk here. Just a few minutes ago, Aaron Rodgers let the story out that he's been playing with a broken thumb ever since week 5. I I don't see a lot of truth behind that. I mean, maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I don't think it's an excuse for the poor play that the Packers have had the past few weeks. But I digress. I mean, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But he's still throwing the ball fairly well. It's not his fault that the receivers are dropping the ball consistently. So it's one of those, where maybe they can turn it around, next year. They need to figure something out with that Packers offense, get Rodgers some sort of, reliable target source, whatever. But that is what it is within Green Bay. Matt Stafford, he is going to be out against the Kansas City Chiefs. Still under concussion protocol. Bryce Perkins is to start in place of Matt Stafford for Week 12. Again, it's really going to be kind of a shorter episode tonight. So we're just going to jump right into it. We're going with Jock versus Joke. For quarterback, our jock this week was Patrick Mahomes. He put up 27.46 points against the Chargers. His stat line was 20 of 34, 329 yards, 3 touchdowns, 4 attempts for 23 yards. He'll have a Week 12 matchup against the Rams. Just mentioned that with the notes on Matthew Stafford. So I kind of expect him to have another big game, personally, because, I mean, the Rams' defense has been, at least their secondary, has been a very easy target for, wide receivers, quarterbacks, so on and so forth, for them to just go off. And Jalen Ramsey isn't playing the way that he's used to play, or that we've seen him play in years past. We thought the Rams would be a much better team, especially after coming off of a Super Bowl victory. But a lot of injuries have prevented the Rams from being the team that we thought they should be. So I look for Patrick Mahomes just to go off again. We'll see for sure. The joke of the week. Listen, we saw what the Cowboys did to my Minnesota Vikings this past week. It was an embarrassment. I don't know what the heck I was watching this past Sunday with the Vikings, but it wasn't football. If it was the worst football I've ever seen played. So with that, my joke of the week for quarterback is Kirk Cousins. He was brought back down to earth by Dallas's defense. He was sacked 7 times for a loss of 49 yards total. He had 2.2 points against Dallas. He went 12 of 23, 105 yards, and he lost a fumble. Ouch. I'm hoping that the Vikings can bounce back tomorrow night against the New England Patriots. But New England's got a tough defense, so we will see. Yeah. It was painful to watch, my Minnesota Vikings lose, that badly. So let's go for Week 12. Hopefully we don't get our second loss, or second loss, or technically our third loss of the season, 2 losses in a row. Let's move on to running backs. I got 2 jocks of the week for running backs. The first one is Tony Pollard. He just went off. In my opinion, he showed why he should be the number 1 running back for the Dallas Cowboys. His stat line was just crazy. He put up 36.9 points against Minnesota. He had 15 rushing attempts for 80 rushing yards, 6 targets for 6 receptions, 109 yards, 2 touchdowns. He has a Week 12 matchup against the New York Giants tomorrow. I believe that is the 1 o'clock game. Let me look up real quick. Yeah, that is the mid game. That'll be a 4:30 tomorrow. The Giants and the Cowboys. The joke of the week, or I'm sorry, the second jock of the week for running backs. I'm going with Najee Harris. He finally showed up. He, played the way we thought he was going to play, when the season first started. He had 20 attempts for 90 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, 6 targets, 4 receptions, 26 yards. He does have a Week 12 matchup against a tough Colts defense. The Colts, man, their defense is one of those defenses that you really don't expect a whole lot, but they've been pretty stout. I mean, they held the Eagles to only 17 points, and quite honestly, you can make the argument that the Colts should have won that game. Their defense just folded in the final few minutes, and that's essentially what lost them the game. So, I mean, if you can hold that Eagles offense in check, then surely you can do the same thing against a Pittsburgh team that really doesn't have an identity. But maybe Najee Harris can prove us wrong again and go off. Let's see. My joke of the week though was Saquon Barkley. He only had 5.5 points. He had 15 attempts for 22 yards, 5 targets for 2 receptions, and only 13 yards against Detroit. Ouch. Maybe he can bounce back. I don't foresee it happening. Not against a Dallas defense that's just firing on all cylinders. Maybe we can get a surprise. Maybe it'll be a Thanksgiving miracle for Saquon to bounce back and put a hurt on Dallas. I doubt it though. Let's see. Let's move on to wide receivers. So my jock of the week for wide receivers, I got to give that to Devontae Adams. He put up 33.1 points. Yeah, 33.1% or 33.1 points against Denver. He had 13 targets for 7 receptions, 141 yards, 2 touchdowns. That is his third game of the season with 2 touchdowns. And he sealed that game with a overtime game-winning touchdown grab against the Broncos. Week 12 matchup against Seattle, I kind of see him having yet another big game. It's pretty obvious he has proven himself as the number one option for Derek Carr and the Las Vegas Raiders. So really, I mean, you don't have Darren Waller. Mac Hollins, yeah, he's kind of made himself, somewhat of a reliable source for Derek Carr. Hunter Renfrow, he's been in and out, whether it's due to injuries or overall performance. So I look for Devontae Adams to have another big game in Week 12. Joke of the week, I mentioned it already. I'll mention it again. Minnesota had a terrible game. So my joke of the week has got to go to Justin Jefferson. Obviously, that's a big result of, Dallas's pressure against Kirk Cousins. I mentioned already they sacked him 7 times for a loss of 49 yards. So it's hard to get, any sort of productivity passing wise, let alone running wise, when, you're getting sacked right off the snap. But Justin Jefferson, he only had 5 targets for 3 receptions and 33 yards. Let's hope that, again, Minnesota can bounce back against the Patriots and Justin Jefferson can get back into form as far as, what he's able to do. Moving on to tight ends. It should come as no surprise, the jock of the week for tight ends was Travis Kelsey. I think it's been pretty obvious, from a fantasy standpoint, if you do not have Travis Kelsey, I mean, you're not going to get a lot of productivity out of your tight ends. So Travis Kelsey stat line: 10 targets, 6 receptions, 115 yards, 3 touchdowns for 35.5 points. Travis Kelsey did Travis Kelsey things against the Chargers in Week 11. I mentioned it that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to play the Rams this week, who are giving up a lot of points through the air. So Travis Kelsey is probably going to have yet another big game. He has 11 touchdowns on the year so far. I believe that is leading the NFL in terms of receiving touchdowns. The only other one I can really think of as to who's leading that is Devontae Adams. But, we'll see. I look for Travis Kelsey to just go off yet again like he has all season long. Joke of the week, I got to give it to TJ Hawkinson. I know I'm mentioning a lot of Vikings players in my jokes of the week, but I mean, overall, is bad football, very bad football, and TJ Hawkinson is no exception to that. Watching that game the other day, we saw a lot of drop passes from him alone. That he was an open target and just dropped what I consider to be easy passes. There was really no one around him at the time when the ball got close to him. Should have been easy grabs, but it is what it is. He only had nine targets, 5 receptions for 34 yards. We've seen him. We've seen TJ Hawkinson have a lot of big games, but we also have seen him have a few bad games, and this was an example of a bad game. So, again, I mentioned it before. I'll mention it again. Minnesota against New England Patriots tomorrow night for Thanksgiving Game 3. Moving on to the waiver wire pickups. So we actually have I have quite a few in terms of running backs. I mentioned it before. The Rams have moved on from Darrell Henderson. So Cam Akers, he's a guy that I would consider picking back up, especially since Matthew Stafford is not going to be playing. I expect a lot of running from the Rams this week between Cam Akers and Kyren Williams. Cam Akers is 43.1% rostered. He is projected 8.1 points against the Chiefs. And then for Kyren Williams, he is 11.6% rostered, and he is projected 7.2 points against the Kansas City Chiefs. So if they are still available in your leagues, I would consider them picking him up if you have an open spot, because Kyren Williams, we projected him, or we have talked about him a few times before the season actually started on, players who we thought might actually come out of nowhere and just show up and show out. He had a pretty decent preseason, and before his injury, I believe he was projected to take over that starting role. So Kyren Williams, definitely one I would consider picking up if you are in need of a running back. Rachaad White from Tampa Bay. He is 39.3% rostered, according to ESPN. He's projected 10.3 points against Cleveland. Rachaad White, he's one of those guys that, in my opinion, I think this time next year, we might be talking about him taking over that starting role for Tampa Bay. We just haven't really seen a lot of we haven't really seen a lot of the productivity we're used to seeing for Leonard Fournette. Let me pull up Rashad White's numbers here for a minute. Yeah, he's one that he's typically hitting his projections. In the Week 10 matchup against Seattle, we saw him rush for 22 times for 105 yards. I mean, that's only 10.5 points, but I mean, for being an RB2 in a for a team whose offensive line has been injury prone all season long, I mean, you can't go wrong with picking up a guy like Rashad White. He he might be a make or break for your team especially if you're making the playoff push. Next two on my list are actually Kansas City Chief running backs. Jerick McKinnon, who is 27.9% rostered. He is projected 9.3 points against the LA Rams. And Isaiah Pacheco, 51% rostered and projected for 10.2 points against the Rams. We mentioned it, I believe it was last week or the week prior. Clyde Edwards-Helaire he's losing that starting job. I mean, he started here, then moved here. You thought he would have been a reliable RB2. No. Now he's not even mentioned really. So if you have roster spots for a running back or you need one, especially this late in the season, Cam Akers, Kyron Williams, Rashad White, Jerick McKinnon, Isaiah Pacheco. As far as wide receivers go, there's really only two names that come to mind. Treylon Burks, he's 32.3% rostered. He's projected 9.6 points against the Bengals this week. But he had a pretty decent stat line against Green Bay, last Thursday. 8 targets for 7 receptions, had 111 yards, 18.1 points, no touchdowns, but I mean, he's one I would definitely consider putting on the watch list for sure. And I don't know, if you need a wide receiver, he's one I would probably look at. Demarcus Robinson from Baltimore, he's another one I would consider. He's only 9.7% rostered according to ESPN. He is projected 9.6 points against Jacksonville. In Week 11 against Carolina, he had 9 targets for 9 receptions, 128 yards, and put up 21.8 points. So, I mean, Mark Andrews, he's kind of been in and out all year long. Devin Duvernay, he's been out more than in, I believe. And Rashad Bateman just isn't living up to the hype that, everyone thought or experts thought he would. So Demarcus Robinson, definitely one I would consider picking up this week if you need a wide receiver. 2 tight ends that really come to mind in terms of waiver wire pickups. Foster Moreau, he's only 26.7% rostered. He is projected for 9.1 points against Seattle. Obviously, I mentioned it earlier, Darren Waller, he's on the IR. And even before he was put on the IR, he wasn't really doing much. So if you are in need of a tight end, Foster Moreau is one, and Logan Thomas is the other one that really comes to mind. Looking at Logan Thomas's numbers against this last week against Houston, he had 6 targets for 5 receptions, 65 yards, 11.5 points. That's not bad. I wouldn't necessarily say he's going to do it consistently, but he's going up against Logan Thomas and the Commanders are going up against Atlanta this week, so it'll be interesting to see. But he might have another big week, especially since I believe Jahan Dotson is out with injury, and Curtis Samuel maybe is out with injury. Let me look at that real quick. No, Curtis Samuel is still healthy right now. But anyway, Taylor Heineken is, proven that he can be effective, more effective than what Carson Wentz has shown, and really get the ball where he needs it to go for everyone to be productive and put up decent numbers. Let's see here. Really, that's about it. Like I said, this was going to be a very quick episode since it was just me tonight, but didn't want to deprive you guys from fantasy notes, news and notes, so on and so forth around the NFL. But, like I said, from the bottom of our hearts, with Jocks of All Trades podcast, we want to thank you guys for subscribing, liking, whether it be through, there we go, Facebook, Twitter, Spotify, YouTube. Thank you to all of our subscribers. Thank you for watching. Thank you for literally everything, guys. We really appreciate it, especially as we get into the holiday season. We hope you guys, have a great holiday season. Have a happy Thanksgiving tomorrow. Tomorrow we are airing our Friendsgiving episode. It's pre-recorded, so I think me personally, I made a fool of myself on that. So, if you feel the need for a good laugh tomorrow, by all means, tune in to Jocks of All Trades podcast for our Friendsgiving episode tomorrow. Actually, I think that's about it. Yeah. So again, hope you guys have a happy Thanksgiving. Go fill up on turkey tomorrow. Watch plenty of football, and have a happy Thanksgiving, y'all.